And action. This is Michael.
Hey, I'm Jake. How you doing?
You
Sorry,
can
just
tell we're a
entranced
little
by
rusty. It's been a while, right?
I'm entranced by the soundtrack that we're doing today.
You listening to it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's about time that we're doing about time.
I was gonna say that you dink.
I
Oh
know.
man.
I had that in the chamber for literally a couple months.
It's been
Uh,
months. After the first week we didn't do it. I was gonna say, well, it's about time.
it's about time we did about time. Um, I would say obviously one of our favorite movies. Kind of a litmus test for the ability to trust someone or not.
Definitely love someone.
Definitely love someone. Trust you maybe
You
it's
can
a
get
very
away with
polarizing film.
yeah, yeah. Um, Honestly, I showed it to my girlfriend like the second time we hung out, and it was a deal breaker for me and how she reacted.
Yeah,
I cried
every time. This
every
is
time. I
every
tried to hold it
time.
in and she looked at me and she's like, "You crying?" And I was like, "No."
So no tears from your girlfriend.
No tears, but internally I mean, I definitely think it's something that you have to adjust to. It's
Hmm.
not a tearjerker for everyone.
Yeah,
I think it's just based on your own relationships and how you can relate to it, obviously. But
yeah. This is my favorite movie of all time. Where does it rank on your list?
is so I got a top three. I don't know
Hmm.
where it would fall in that, but it's cemented in the top three. My
Yeah.
three are above everything else, I think, right now.
Hmm. Yeah.
But yeah,
There's a wide gap for sure, probably in both of our top threes, where they just kind of set at the top.
it's the bar.
Yeah. This is, you know me, our listeners, if anyone's listening, this probably knows me. Pretty mild-mannered guy,
Yeah.
but certain things can get me riled up. And this is one of the only times I've ever gotten into, in a world of social media,
Oh wow.
a an altercation with someone I have no idea who this person is, just a random commenter about this film.
I think we
And
need
it
to hear
went
that
back and
story.
forth for a couple hours. And
That's hours.
I'd
You
love
let
to
it
see
go
what
that
I
long?
said. Well, I had to wait for them to respond. They had to wait for me to respond.
Wow.
But it's like I said, it's very polarizing.
Yeah.
You could see the main character in our film as somebody who uh is just somebody who loves so deeply, or
Mm.
some people have which I still don't understand, but we can kind of talk through it a little bit. Someone who's a creep, stalker, somebody who just just isn't what we believe him to be. So we I obviously have some deep thoughts about that. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I've gone to war for this movie as well. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
it's
Uh,
it it feels like something that if you like this movie or if you have this movie as one of your top films of all time, it's going to be something that you have to defend. I mean,
mhm.
it's not everyone's cup of tea, obviously. Like we've run into people that, like you said, think that it's a creepy rom-com, and I just couldn't disagree. I couldn't disagree more. Um,
Yeah.
I think it's one of the most romantic movies of all time, and we'll get into that later. Sorry if yeah, we'll
We're
get
not
into that.
overstepping at all. First, I just kind of want to talk about the casting.
Yeah,
I can't see anybody else in any of these roles. You're starting with Gleason, with our main character.
just
He's
masterful.
such a lot of people probably know him from Star Wars, the new trilogy, as kind of the villain that turns at the end, kind of a lost character in the shuffle of that. But otherwise, he's been in a lot of other stuff, but I can't see anybody else but him in that role.
So I did have I know that you wanted to talk about casting, so I have some like what ifs down.
Yeah,
I know it's kind of infringing on another podcast that we both love, but
no copyright
no
infringement. We
copyright.
didn't
We
say
have
the
no
whole thing.
listeners. So, Kit Harington in that role,
Yeah.
Jon Snow,
Hmm.
that's about the right time frame.
Yeah.
I think he would have played a different Tim.
Yeah. We're looking at about a year or two into Game of Thrones, so
Yeah. Still
probably
young. He would
seeing
have
a more
been,
subdued Tim.
mhm. he wouldn't have been as goofy, but he would have
Mhm.
been more of like a recluse character where a little more mysterious, maybe.
Yeah. And my background just kind of just to set the mood for their beach house. And you saying Harrington makes me think I can't really see him on the beach, like you said, less silly.
Right.
Um, could have made, like I said, a lot of more somber moments, but
Oh yeah,
I
it would have been a more.
it's
I
so
think it
well
would have been a
written.
sad movie if Kit Harington. I don't
Yeah,
think anybody else can play Tim. I just
yeah.
want to throw that out there.
That's just one. Yeah, if you could
Yeah,
had to pick somebody,
yeah,
obviously you have the British roots in there too, so that makes sense. But
yeah.
Rachel McAdams is perfect in every way in this movie.
You know my opinion on Rachel McAdams. Okay,
Yes, I
this is
do. We'll
my
keep it
wife.
PG for this podcast.
Yeah,
And then Margot Robbie as well. This is
yeah,
kind of the turn for her. This is 2013. Wolf of Wall Street's the next year where she's really and Focus
yeah.
is right in this time frame as well. So she's with Will Smith, Leonardo DiCaprio.
So,
But just again, stepping on another podcast, just an incredible
yeah.
10-minute run.
Oh my gosh, it's
10
just actually
threes, couple
incredible
alley
for
oops,
Margot.
10
And this is
rebounds,
kind
10
of the
assists.
if we're looking back at her career, this is kind of the trampoline moment. I
Hmm.
think if this doesn't happen, who knows if we get Margot Robbie, Wolf of Wall Street,
Hmm.
Margot Robbie, anything. Like this is where she really makes her mark. She's the hot one. She's the hot girl in this
Hmm.
story. I mean, that's my one thing about Rachel McAdams. She's unbelievably attractive. Like I'll go to war for that. And I think the Mary character is supposed to be kind of plain, and I think they like the script has her as more of a plain um person,
Hmm.
but she just is so bubbly that it jumps off the page. And honestly, I think it makes it better. I know that can be like somebody's negatives for this movie, but another casting what if for the Mary role, Keira Knightley,
Yeah.
maybe too hot.
Nah. That would have been a fun reuniting with Richard Curtis for her. She's
Yeah.
in Love Actually, which is a
Yeah,
Richard
which
Curtis movie,
she's
which
amazing in
kind of
that.
seems like she could have found a role in here somewhere.
Hmm.
She could have even been the Margot Robbie character, in my opinion.
She could be
Wouldn't
both.
wouldn't
Yeah.
have the same effect, but I could see her more in that role.
Hmm.
Just
Um,
kind of in and out.
Also, one that my dad actually brought up, Jennifer Lawrence, I think would have been
Mm,
also amazing in that role.
playing an
Um,
American, so it would have fit.
right, yeah. I
Mhm.
think if I don't think the movie collapses without if those two switch. I think
Yeah,
it's obviously perfect with Rachel McAdams, but it can still be very good with J Law.
you'd need no hard feelings, Jennifer Lawrence, like her now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, not at the time, but for sure, I could see that. It'd be a pivot for her, but
Because this was like Hunger Games time. Like
yeah,
this is when she was like really coming out.
a few years off of Winter's Bone.
Yeah. Another one for the dad, for
Mm,
Tim's dad, Michael Caine
yeah,
or Alan Arkin, I think would have been pretty
Alan
money.
Arkin would have given it a fun spin for
Yeah.
sure.
Um, and then for like a more serious role, like if it went with Kit Harington, like Jeremy Irons or Bryan Cranston,
Ooh, yeah, Jeremy Irons would be fun.
that would
Just
I
kind
think
of a
if you go Kit Harington, you got to switch up the dad too
yeah.
because
The
and then
silliness
that would have
wouldn't have
been
any kind of effect on the movie
right.
at that point.
But the
Um,
movie's perfect as it is, so
yeah.
that's that about the casting.
One
What if?
one
But
more I'd say that's irreplaceable in this movie that doesn't necessarily make it for me, but puts the cherry on top is not Tom Holland, but Tom Hollander.
mm, huh,
The let me get his name right, Harry.
yeah. What about
So
Tom
the
Holland Est?
what'd you say?
Tom Holland Est.
Yes. So it's the guy that Tim moves in with into the
Yeah, the
city. He doesn't know
playwright.
who he is. He's the playwright.
He's
It's
amazing in this
again
role.
another uh reunion for him and Bill Nye, the father, to
Mm,
Pirates of the Caribbean villains.
awesome.
But his demeanor throughout the whole film and just his pessimistic attitude and how Tim rubs off on him, which we'll
Hmm.
get to a little later, but it's just
When
beautiful. You see both sides of it.
when he brings the teddy bear to the the first birthday,
Hmm.
and the life-size teddy bear's there, and he's
Hmm.
just that's me. That I
Yeah.
mean, like, that is me in life. I feel like just come on, like I can't do anything right type of deal type of
Just so
guy.
miserable. Always want to know where the next drink is. Just
But he obviously cares. Is
yeah,
the whole like
because he's
that to
there.
me is the breaking point of characters like that. If there's no humanity to them and they just hate everything, like that's nobody. Nobody
Yeah.
just hates everything.
Hmm.
There's always a glimmer, and sometimes you just need your Tim. You just need your spark to come back and give you a
Hmm.
little push into the good side.
Yeah. Uh, moving through this to just people categorize this as a rom-com, and I'm hesitant to that. You can see how you could have that argument, but I think that's a very shallow take on the film. I would categorize it in four different ways. I would just call it a love story, but the love story between a father and a son, the
Which
love between a wife, love for a sister or sibling of some
Mhm.
kind, and love for your kids. It's fourfold here of a love story in so many different ways, and why I'll go to bat for it and get on Instagram arguments with people.
Yeah, I mean, it transcends rom-coms.
Yeah.
Like if someone was to say, "Can you name me a rom-com to watch?" I would say, "Well, do you just want to like watch a movie and fall asleep, or do you want to actually like grow as a person?" And
Hmm.
if they want to grow as a human being, you throw this movie on, okay?
Hmm.
Anybody can relate to this movie. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
You have a friend that you love, you have a sibling that you love, you have a parent that you love, or you have someone special in your life that you love. Everybody has at least one of those. Like, there's no way that anybody can not relate to this movie, and Tim is just the perfect catalyst for all of those types of love.
Yeah. It's at first, and I had it first for a reason. I think it's a father-son love movie, love
Hmm.
story.
And that's what I
Just
think flies over a lot of heads is
yep.
like on the surface, like you're going in for the love story between Mary and Tim, but then you get halfway through this movie and you're like, holy crap, this is a father and son
Hmm.
movie. This is a
Yep.
movie that you want to share with your dad.
I think it's deliberate that uh Tim and Mary are married quite quite early into the movie.
Yeah.
Like there's the chase for him of getting Mary and going to dinner, and then he redoes the whole night and loses her and doesn't know who she is, and he stays at the gallery. He does all of that, and then they end up together and it's quick, and before you know it, he's turning away Margot Robbie's character and they're getting married. And it's
Like
maybe an
40
hour
minutes
into
into
the
the
film,
film.
maybe a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
and then it totally shifts again.
It makes me wonder, do you think that it was always like that? Or do you think they went into this movie having 2 hours worth of him using time travel to chase Mary? And then they quickly realized, hey, we got like a special story here that we can
Mhm.
tell. And I'd watch a 5 hour cut of this movie, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Or a three-parter. Give me a three-parter.
Hmm.
First part, him learning how to, use time travel. Second part, he finds Mary. Third part, finds life, honestly, is what
Yeah.
the third act of this movie is. It's him finding.
Knowing Richard Curtis and his material, writer and director of this film, like you look at a movie like Love Actually, which I'm not as high on. I know a lot of
I think
people have
that's
when it comes to
fantastic
Christmas
as
time.
well. I'll do an
You,
episode on Love Actually as
you like
well.
Love Actually?
That's a great ensemble cast. It's not as deep as this, but it's still,
It is. I see a lot of flaws in it, but I also could just be comparing it to this, knowing it's the same guy.
I
So
mean,
I
they're
I
so
understand
similar.
that I could
They're
see that
so
from it.
similar.
But
Also, Keira
knowing
Knightley was like 12 years younger than her counterpart in that movie. We don't, never
yeah.
mind.
But knowing his level of story building, like you look at Love Actually and how everything comes together. Like
Hey,
even though I don't love the movie that much, I can respect the
actually,
craft of that. Yeah, actually, no. Um, One thing that's not necessarily difficult, but something that's hard to reorient yourself every time you go into this. Like this is a once a year watch for me. I don't like to overdo it. If we have
okay,
some kind of big life event or a move, like me and Caitlin will watch it together. But the jargon and the
that's
UK
goals.
language itself and the jokes, it
Love
it
it.
takes a second. It's kind of like watching Sherlock or if any Downton Abbey fans, like you have to get used to it.
Sherlock is amazing again. I think
Yeah.
British TV and movies is fantastic. So honestly, I don't have that like jarring
Mm,
response. I think that I, I don't know if it's just watching a lot or watching enough of
yeah.
British media, but I don't think it's that bad. moving like
No,
as an American going into it. That's not a knock that I would have at all on this movie.
no, I wouldn't necessarily consider it a knock on the movie. I just think it's interesting for like for it to be my favorite film, and it's
Yeah, true,
I
true.
I purposefully put it to the back of my mind so that when it's time to revisit, I'm fresh and it's like, oh, I forgot about that. And
Yeah,
so I try and keep it in the back there so that when it comes up, things like this are happening. So I don't consider it a knock. I consider it like a fun surprise every time you go back to it.
yeah, true.
Another thing with this movie is it's just brilliant use of montage.
Mm.
Um, whether it's like the chase for Margot Robbie's character, going after her during that summer, the tennis match, going into all of the beach scenes, going into his different times going back to the past to try and win her over, or to
I think
what do you have?
the my favorite montage is when they keep coming in and out of the subway.
Yep, that's
Um,
exactly what I was gonna say.
and that sequence of the movie I could watch over and over again.
It's
Just
that
the
song that
progression of their
plays,
love.
How
How
Long
long
Will I
can
Love
I
You?
love you?
Oh my goodness, I mean, it made it
I
to
was
our
just
wedding.
that's the listen. That's the last song I had on my Apple Music playing right before this.
Hmm.
And that is to prove it. I was halfway through. What a fantastic song. What a
Yeah.
fantastic soundtrack in general.
Well, the that song specifically, the words are great. Like the melody obviously keeps you going with it, but it was so great that we added it to our wedding playlist.
That's
It
amazing.
was yeah, it was the song that we didn't walk down the aisle to it, we walked out of the aisle to it. So
Okay. That's awesome.
you may kiss the bride, boom, and then like Mr. and Mrs. Brayman, and we're out and walking through like for the big, swing kiss. That's the
Yeah.
song that was playing. So that's a special one for us when
And
that
I was in
plays.
attendance for that. That was amazing.
Yep, that's a pretty special one, and the montage plays a big factor in that too.
Yeah.
Of the steadiness of the band playing in the subway, and you see them going their separate ways and coming back for
Always
one more
coming
hug and
back.
kiss, and
Always
uh,
coming.
it shows the passage of time really well. Because if you watch the movie and aren't paying too good attention, it might seem like they get married like that, but once you realize they're spending time together, like
The montage is months of time, I think.
they go from Halloween, they're dressed up for
Yeah,
Halloween.
it's like
Uh,
almost every holiday
they're in
is
winter
shown
clothes.
in.
They're in yeah, there's definitely a Christmas spot. They're holding a bunch of bags that looks like they've
Right.
just gone shopping. They're in warm weather clothes. You can tell that they've spent a ton of time together. And it does that really effectively.
Uh-huh. And another wedding song, I might have Armando play when when the bride walks down the aisle.
See,
That
and
might
that
just have
that
to.
that goes back to the father-son portion of this because
Yeah, that
that's the moment where you it's the wedding, right?
mhm.
It's her moment, it's their moment together, but what song is playing?
It's it just subverts everything. It's
It's the
amazing.
father son song. It's because he shares this moment with his dad too, which is just so
Yeah.
beautiful on so many different levels.
And it's also just like the perfect father-in-law relationship with
Mhm.
that's like who you want
Oh,
your wife to be. Like you want
well,
them to you want
we'll
them to
get to
want to
that.
be a part of your family.
We'll get to that, and I don't want to get emotional when we talk about it, but that's a moment and that whole scene we'll talk about. Uh, we'll get through these couple other things so we can talk about that end part of this movie. But when we were scheduled to do this a couple months ago, I was explaining it to a work colleague of my dad's who hadn't seen it yet. And I couldn't find the words to explain the movie because I don't think there's a way that you can explain this movie without the other person having seen it because you're like, well, the guy, and we haven't even mentioned it yet, really. Like the guy can go back in time and everyone in his all the guys in his family can but it's not like weird. Like don't get me wrong, it's not like a sci-fi movie, but then he goes
Yeah.
back and then he meets his wife and then he doesn't meet his wife and now he's got to find his like it's so confusing to talk about, but you
Yeah.
watch it and you're in it. There's a complete inability to explain the movie and that's kind of what makes it great.
Yeah, but then when you tell somebody, hey, like, what's your favorite movie? About time, and they go, oh, you're just
Mhm.
like, I'm with you for life now, bro.
Yeah,
Like
like
it's
we are
like
here.
you
Everyone
actually
else is out of
have
this
a
and
brain
we're
and a
here.
heart, honestly, is what I think.
What'd you say?
You just have a brain and a heart.
Yeah, you know how to watch something and take it in and really
You have a
feel.
soul.
Um, another just great part of this movie. I have a few of these written down, just the quotes from the movie. From the last time I saw it, they just kind of really stuck out to me. This is from Tim. Lesson number one: all time traveling in the world can't make someone love you. That's
That
obviously in response to Margot Robbie's character.
I say that a lot.
Hmm.
And
And
that's something like I think this movie has a lot of lessons that I mean we don't have to get into all of it like because everybody has their own takeaways. But that one for me like going through different relationships is like all the work in the world won't give you that spark, won't give you that connection. And when you know, you know. And when they know, they'll know. So
mhm.
sorry to interrupt you there.
No, no. Another one here. I believe this is from Tim's father. When he finally chooses him for his best man, he goes through a bunch of different iterations of the speech, but his dad says, I'd only give one piece of advice to anyone marrying. We're all quite similar in the end. We all get old and tell the same tales too many times. But try and marry someone kind. And this is a kind man with a good heart. I'm not particularly proud of many things in my life, but I am very proud to be the father of my son.
Hmm.
Like if you could create a template for a father's best man speech for his son, I don't think that anyone could write anything better. I think when Richard Curtis is writing that, you see
That's
the
just
meme of the
boom, boom,
feather in the
boom.
pen where it's on
The
fire.
fire.
It's there's no notes there. 10 out of 10, no notes. And it shows Tim he should have had him all along as his best man. And it's kind of like a why didn't I think of this sooner? He's my best friend. Um, it just makes so much more sense.
That this movie actually makes me want to have my dad as my best man.
Yeah.
Like I don't know anybody else who could um capture that or
Hmm.
capture that moment quite like my dad because
Yeah.
nobody knows you like your parents know you.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Um, what do you think of her? Tim asks his father, and he goes, "I like her more than you already." It's
Perfect.
just it's great.
One of the
Um,
things that the dad says is when he Tim first learns about his power and he's like, "Well, for now I might want to get a girlfriend." And the dad goes, "Massive." I say that all the time. I'm like, massive.
massive.
That's just the dad just with the one-liners. It's just all just amazing.
Yeah. Um, Now two of the quotes that get to the end of the film, which can kind of segue us into that. Um, the first one, they find out the news that he's sick. It hasn't been told to us yet, but they open the door and the wife
Come
opens the
on.
door. She says, "I am effing furious. I am utterly uninterested in a life without your father." And that's the one that gets me every time. That's the one that just being married now and feeling that and understanding the love it takes to be with somebody until death, it's like, man, that hurts. And being uninterested in a life without somebody is real. And I think just it's simple, like it's not the language isn't anything crazy there. It's not some big monologue. It's right to the point and it just hits you.
Hmm. I
And
do have one from the end of the movie. I don't know how end of the movie you're going.
well, I'll go to the next one where it's Um, they just go right down the hall to
Okay.
what's the uncle's name again?
Desmond.
Desmond. And Tim asks him how he's doing, and he's like, I'm good. But then he says, Your father, I think, is not so well. Cancer. And he says, Yes. And then he says to him, I'm very unhappy about it, Tim. At your wedding, he said that he loved me. And Tim says, I does, or he does. And he says, I know. That was probably the best day of my life. So this is probably the worst. And that you could even add, well, we already have siblings on the list of the love stories, um, just in-laws. Okay,
Yeah.
the in-laws nature and relationship between Desmond and the father, which you don't see throughout the movie. You don't see them interact much,
No,
but
it just implied at
yeah,
that point of like they
that one
obviously
line of dialogue kind of shows the relationship that the father was able to have with everybody.
that one line literally gives 50 years of backstory.
Hmm.
It's incredible.
Hmm. And you know that Desmond's kind of a quirky guy
Hmm.
and maybe not a ton going on upstairs, and he's just kind of going through life, but you can tell that just the kindness of the dad in that moment,
When
and that
when
one line of
Tim
dialogue, right? Like
when
it
Tim
just
tells his dad,
encapsulates
his
everything.
family, sorry,
No, you
when,
you
when
got
Tim tells his family that Mary's pregnant, and Uncle Desmond goes, "Who's the father?"
it.
Just so good, just so good.
It's
And such
great.
a
And
sad, serious movie. Just
yeah,
so funny at the same time.
so many laugh out loud moments.
So like yeah,
Like when
100%.
Margot Robbie's character is there for the summer and they're like, Charlotte, we've loved having you here all summer. He's like, who's Charlotte?
Who's Charlotte?
He's like, one sitting next to you. He's like, very nice to meet you.
I'm
And the
Desmond.
whole summer. It's great. But we haven't really talked about the sibling relationship much. Um, Kit Kat, the sister, is kind of the outcast of the family. I forget what she calls herself, but she's, like
She's
the one,
taller.
the
One
faller.
one
I think
one
that's right.
kid in every family falls,
Hmm.
and that's me, or something. She says something like that, and it's just like so sad. Like
Yeah.
I hope nobody feels like that.
Yeah. It's hard when um a lot of this movie I can relate to and you can relate to. Um that's just a portion of the movie I haven't been able to relate to as much. So it's harder to understand her character as much as the rest of the characters, but it's really, I don't want to say it's a depressing story thread throughout the movie, but it's something weighing Tim down and
It's
you can feel it.
grounding. It's grounding for
Yeah.
sure.
Especially the scene where her boyfriend comes in, which also perfect casting because you just want to. He's got the
Punch
most
that guy in the
punchable face.
face.
Yeah.
Kick him in
Um,
the jaw.
you see him come in, and he's clearly inebriated or recovering from some kind of intoxication, and just to you feel the genuine love that everyone else has for each other in the movie, and then you see the example of him and Kit Kat and how they might call it love,
Mm,
but you know that it's not.
yeah.
You know that this is just the fling of the
Toxic.
week or whatever you want to call it
It's toxic.
that ends up going on for years and years.
Hmm.
And Tim ultimately has to make the hard decision of I'm going to take her back and she's going to avoid him and she's going to live a great life. She's going to learn her lesson, but it comes at the cost of now having a different child, which I think
Wild. A
is
wild twist.
which I understand, and it
I could
it
do
makes the
without that
plot go
twist.
forward, but I think it's the weakest part of the movie, the
Me
the
too.
time travel mechanics of it all. I
We don't
think
need to talk about the mechanics because the
no,
whole the whole thing crumbles if you like think about it for more than 20 seconds.
right.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't love that portion of the movie because I
Yeah.
think I feel like we could have just had a real moment with Kit Kat and it would have been a lot better. Um
Yeah. Or just like fix her. I don't know. Go back in time and like not change the child. I don't know. But then it gives that I think the only reason that part is in the movie is to make the final scenes hit so hard because you know
yeah,
it's the last time for sure.
yeah.
Um,
They've
because
set the
obviously
precedent for what it is.
you're not going to sacrifice your child to see your dad, like to see a
Right.
parent. And I think that's like the whole that's why that's in there. And I get that. It just it bothers me a little bit. That's the only thing that bothers me about the movie.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the ending. Or the at least last portion of the movie.
Yeah.
I You can chunk the movie up into a few different parts. I think it's obviously best when you watch it all the way through in one sitting. I wouldn't watch it any other way, but you get to the part where um, there she's trying on all the dresses, which is again just another laugh out loud moment before it
Mhm.
all comes crumbling down of uh, is this one too chesty? Is this one, oh, it's too brown? She goes through all of them. She ends up with the one that she first
With the
tried on,
first
which
one.
a great trope in movies that never gets old. But they leave their daughter downstairs, and she's shredded some kind of manuscript or book that Rachel McAdams' character is needed to read. And Tim just tries to get out of it as best he can. Like, just trust me, I'm gonna leave the room, and everything's
And
gonna be
everything's gonna be
okay.
all right.
It's gonna be okay. And then the phone rings, and Tim has definitely become overly reliant on going back into the past and fixing things. And this is something he can't fix, or at least he won't be able to fix later. And you get that news. I went over the couple quotes, just being uninterested in the life without him, and that next conversation they have where the dad kind of gives the revelation that this isn't the first time he's had this conversation.
Yeah.
It's
Which that is a hard-hitting moment in this film. The whole sequence is. And but this is really where all of the lessons in this movie culminate into the last like 20 minutes, and you really like learn a lot about I learn a lot about myself and how I should live life. I don't know if you're gonna go
mhm.
into that, but I'll let you talk on that. It's
Yeah.
just like this is what the last 20 minutes is what makes this movie so great.
Oh yeah. It ties it up in a nice bow. And he has that conversation with him and he says, like he feels like he didn't do a good job of it the first time around. He didn't have a good conversation with Tim. And he asked him what he did, and he said like that he hugged him.
Yeah.
And Tim's like, "Are you kidding?" And he doesn't say anything, but he gets up and he gives him a hug.
I could do with that.
And it's just beautiful. It's just an amazing moment. But one thing I need to hit is when they're leaving. And you talked about the perfect father-in-law relationship, not even just the father relationship with Mary and the
Mhm.
dad. When they leave, trying to jog your memory of it too, as they're leaving, they're giving their hugs goodbye and they're making their way to the car. Their kids are crying, so they're dealing with that. They're getting into the car, and what does Mary do?
She goes and
She
hugs.
turns around and comes and gives him one last hug.
Yeah.
And that, just like that one line from Uncle Desmond, it shows you their relationship
Hmm.
that you don't see throughout the movie. You barely see them interact. I can't even remember past maybe a
I,
moment at the wedding, but I can't even
I
think
don't
of one.
even know a line that they say to each other.
Yeah, but you feel that, and part of
Mhm.
that could be her relationship with Tim and how much she knows he means to Tim. But it goes much deeper than that.
I think it's more of a this is how like l loving this man lives.
Yeah.
And it's just I think everybody should strive to live like that. And his little rules of how he chose to use the time travel mechanic in his own life to kind of just represent the best of himself and who he truly was on the inside.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. It's just hard to talk about sometimes of
Yeah. Um, And I think the only acceptable way to talk about the time travel mechanics and like the use of it is here at the end
yeah.
because they know it's like time's up and they have the beautiful moment on the beach where they're like, if we don't change anything, I think we can make this work.
But
And
we
they
don't.
have that moment where that's instantly where, waterworks come.
It's waterfall actually
Yeah.
for this is when I cried right in front of my girlfriend of not even girlfriend yet.
Hmm.
Literally had known her for 2 weeks and I showed her about time and that was
Yeah.
not a manly scene in
Well,
my apartment.
nonetheless, it's a beautiful scene and it hits in all the right different ways. And then you shift forward. He's had his newest child and he's living his life. And you go through a brand new montage, which we talked about earlier, but the most effective, in my opinion, and the most thought-provoking. And like you said, the last 20 minutes of this movie makes you think how you live your life. And I would argue it's the last four during this
Are you
long.
referring to when he goes back and lives every day the second time?
Yes. So
I think
we
that's
see
the
Tim, and he goes through his day once, and it's a pretty sucky day. He's a
mhm.
lawyer, and he wins a case, but he's not happy about it, and he doesn't interact with the cashier. He just everything is terrible, and
Yeah.
then he goes and lives it again, and everything's great, and then he goes through and he starts to explain that now I don't even go back and live days over.
I was actually going to read this.
Yeah.
So this is voiceover over the while this montage is happening. And so he told me his secret formula for happiness. Part one of the two-part plan was that I should just get on with ordinary life, living it day by day like anyone else would. But then came part two of Dad's plan. He told me to live every day, again, almost exactly the same. The first time with all the tensions and worries that stop us from noticing how sweet the world can be, but the second time noticing. And he says, "Okay, Dad, let's give it a go." And he starts doing it, and that this is what I take away from this movie is after like for like weeks after every time I watch this, I just feel happier almost
Hmm.
because the little things in life like traffic, you can just sit there and get pissed, or you can sit there and notice everything that is beautiful about the suck, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. And then he goes in later and says, and in the end, I think I've learned the final lesson from my travels in time. I've even gone one step further than my father did. The truth is, I now don't travel back at all, not even for the day. I just try to live every day as if I've deliberately come back to this one to enjoy it, as if it was the full final day of my extraordinary, ordinary life. And
Hmm.
that's a quote that can literally resonate with anybody
Yep.
because we're all extraordinarily ordinary.
Hmm.
And that I don't know. If everybody watched this movie and had that in their mind, I think the world would be a much, much better place.
Yeah.
And so that's the one thing that if I ever got a tattoo, I think that something along those lines is what I would
Mhm.
get
Yeah.
branded on my body for eternity.
Yeah. I don't think there's any other way that we could finish that. I think that was beautiful. Uh, how you use your time and through the model of Tim and his dad in this movie is just incredible. Um, we love this movie. We're running out of time here in our last minute. Next up, we've got Everybody Wants Some, which we're both very excited for. A little bit different tone
Tone
coming.
shift.
Yeah, little tone shift here, but just as good of a movie in my opinion.
Might
Uh,
even get a special guest on next pod.
hey, maybe we can shop it around for sure.
Never know.
A little bit more in our wheelhouse of the college baseball scene. But until then, this has been about or not about time and action.
And action.
Still rusty. I'm
Pow.
Michael. Here we go.
We need a theme song.
Do 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 do.